Hello guys, and welcome to day 8 of the Wellbeing Essentials, where we are talking about nourishment. So as with the movement we discussed yesterday, our understanding of nutrition is a pretty complicated one these days. Food and drink is a basic survival need, so we tend to obsess about it, but actually most of us don't really understand the effects that it has on our bodies and our minds. And once again, the sciences and the industries can add to this confusion and this lack of understanding. Now, many years ago, there used to be a very close link between our movement and our nutrition. We used to have to hunt and forage for our food. So we used to walk and run and sprint and jump and fight. We used to have to earn everything that we ate and we drank. But we just don't have to do that anymore. Food and drink is in plentiful supply for most of us, and relatively is pretty cheap as well. This means that most of us will overconsume, not necessarily all the time, but generally we tend to eat and drink more than we need to, and sometimes we can do that on quite a big level. Now, as well as that, most of our food supply these days has been messed with or processed by humans in some way or another. This means that the food and the drink that we're consuming is not as nature intended it, and as a result, our bodies are becoming less effective at regulating themselves and dealing with what we're giving them. Now, some people suggest various ways of us getting around that. For instance, we're told to avoid things, avoid red meat, avoid sugar, avoid fat, avoid eating after 7 p.m. Other people will tell us to obsess on the details. So in my ebook I spoke fairly briefly about the calories in versus calories out argument. And whilst there is truth in this theory, the fact is the way it's communicated is so oversimplified that it just doesn't work for most of us. What goes into our bodies is just the start. Okay, what we absorb is as important, and actually once we've absorbed it, our body and our minds are in control with where it goes. It has choices and we have very little control over that. So all things considered, the relationship we have with our food these days is gone kind of seriously wrong, and it's creating some pretty big increases in disease and mortality. And as I discussed yesterday, to get around this, I think we really need to get back to basics. We need to simplify what we do with our food. Now, I hope that you recognise this diagram, since it was only yesterday we looked at it, but this is our stimulus adaptation response diagram, and this is the process that kind of allows us to live. It's what allows us to progress and survive, and for us it's what allows us to move towards our goals. We discussed movement being a stimulus, and today I said we were going to talk about food and drink fitting into the adaptation phase. And this is why we've called this lesson Nourishment. Because the food and drink, it has to nourish your body if this adaptation is going to occur. You need to give yourself the energy and the nutrients to allow the adaptation to create the response. Now, within the well-being context, we want to concentrate on the basics of movement, the basics of nourishment, the basics of rest and recovery that we'll discover tomorrow. And when we get those right, without even getting into any specifics, you can have a huge impact on your well-being. So what are the basics of nutrition? Well, within my coaching practice with my clients, I help them work towards eating the right food in the right amount at the right time. But that's a relatively complicated process, and it takes a little bit of time. So today we're just going to discuss the first one. We're going to talk about eating the right food. Now, for most of us, we can make big improvements by concentrating on 4 things. We can concentrate on eating less calorie-dense foods, more nutrient-dense foods, we can reduce the toxic load of our food, and we can eat food that improves our gut health and what's called our microbiome. Now, that last one is a little bit complex, but there's more to all of those. And the fact is, we can make really big improvements for all of them with one simple action, and that is to eat unprocessed food. We need to eat food that hasn't been messed with by humans. We want to eat food that is a single ingredient rather than loads of different ingredients thrown together. We want to eat food that used to grow on a tree or in the ground, that used to run around or used to swim. this stuff is going to nourish your body. Okay, it's less calorie dense and it's more nutrient dense. It's going to give you all of the macronutrients, the micronutrients and the phytonutrients that you need for this adaptation to occur, for that response to occur. It's also much less heavy in chemicals and preservatives and other toxins, and all in, it allows your body to start governing itself much more effectively. In time, you will naturally start to align your input with your output, and you will start to move towards health and happiness. Now, again, well-being being an active process, there is a task to do, and I bet you can guess what it is. You're right, it is to eat some unprocessed food. Now, I don't want you to stress out about this. We're talking small action steps. And the thing is, you'll be doing some of this already, but what I want you to do is just try and do it a little bit more each day. Just once a day, make an active decision, a conscious choice to eat one unprocessed item as opposed to something that has been processed. Then build it to 2, and then 3. Bit by bit, start moving towards having a much less processed diet. Now, I don't want you to stress too much about the types of foods that you're eating. Don't worry about carbs, don't worry about fats and sugars and all of the other things that people tell you to avoid or to double up on. Just eat in accordance with your taste buds and eat unprocessed foods as often as you can do. Now, if you're doing this already, then excellent work, well done. But there are maybe a few upgrades that you can try. So you can go organic, and you can also go organic and local, because that means that you're guaranteed to be eating food that's in season, which is really good, especially from a variety point of view. You can then try and eat grass-fed meats or wild, sustainably caught fish. And you can even try and eat some bioactive or biodynamic foods. And these are the ones that are really good for your gut health. So things like sauerkraut, kimchi, miso, kefir, kombucha, all of your fermented vegetables are really, really good for building health around your gut and your immune system. Now, as I said, don't stress about this. Bit by bit, if it goes wrong, don't worry about it. Apply some of that self-compassion that we've spoken about. Just get back up and try again. We know that small little steps every day, if you're good to yourself and if you abide by everything else we've spoken about, will lead you on this awesome well-being journey. Okay, tomorrow we're going to move on to talk about the last phase of this adaptation, which is the rest and recovery. In the meantime, if you've got any questions or reflections about today's lesson, then by all means get in touch. But in the meantime, go out there, eat some unprocessed food, enjoy it, and I'll see you tomorrow.